Well, he's at it again. Chris Bowen is at it again. This bloke is not content to mislead Australians just on energy and the net zero scam. He's now misleading Australians about housing construction and the housing crisis that we've got. So again, let's look at exactly what he says, to be fair to him, and then let's go through the data to show how dishonest and deceptive his comments are.
This video is for Australians looking to buy their first home. If that's not you, keep scrolling. The Albanese government's making it easier by reducing deposits to just 5%. And we're also building 100,000 new homes just for first home buyers. You know, the housing shortage developed over generations. It won't be fixed overnight, but we're making good progress. A new home just for you.
Okay, so let's get the quote exactly right. He said here, the housing shortage developed over generations.
You know, the housing shortage developed over generations.
Well, okay, let's just firstly check this data. Now, firstly, let's have a look at this graph that shows the migration numbers into this country. You can see here when Labor came to power, migration numbers surged. In the year 2022-2023, the financial year, the ABS has the net migration number at 536,000. That is more than double any other time in our history. We traditionally have had, going back over the past century, an average migration rate of less than 100,000 a year, a net migration rate. The Albanese government kicked that up to over 500,000 people in a single 12-month period. And then they backed it up the following year, 2023-2024, with another 446,000. So in the first 2 years of the Albanese government, they imported 982,000 people into this country. That's the net rate. So migration increased the population of this country alone, 982,000, almost 1 million people. More than we've ever had, more than double what we've ever had in any 2-year period in our nation's history. And Mr. Bowen says the housing shortage developed over generations. Well, you can't believe the dishonesty of those words. The housing crisis and the housing shortage is directly related. If you bring 1 million people into the country, you have to substantially increase the number of houses that you are constructing and building and approving. So again, let's have a look at what that data shows. So let's go again to the Australian Bureau of Statistics numbers, and let's have a look at what the data that they have for total dwellings completed. And here's the graph. And you can see when the Albanese government has kicked migration rates through the ceiling in that 2022-2024 period, what's happened to dwellings completed? Well, they've actually gone down. Dwellings completed are now 20% down on what they are in 2017. So instead of the substantial increase that you would expect, the numbers of dwellings completed actually went down. That is why there is a housing crisis, because Albanese, his government, imported 1 million people at a time when housing completions were down. Okay, Labor say he's fixing it. Mr. Bowen has said, we can't fix it overnight, we are making progress.
It won't be fixed overnight, but we're making good progress.
Okay, well, let's have a look at, let's test out that. So again, let's have a look at the data. Firstly, we've got 2 pieces of data. We've got dwellings commenced and dwellings approved. So let's have a look at the dwelling commencements. And again, here you see this graph directly from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. And what does it show? That under Labor, since we've had this migration rate going through the ceiling, the number of dwellings commenced is actually been declining. In fact, the number of dwellings commenced today is less than it was back in 2017. Well, okay, maybe they haven't commenced and they've approved them. So let's have a look at the ABS data on dwellings approved. Now, you'd expect if Albanese's are taking all this action, as Mr. Bowen said, we are making good progress, you would expect to see the number of dwellings approved skyrocket in line with the way migration rates skyrocketed. But again, what does the data show? Well, since Labor have come to power, the number of dwellings are actually going backwards. The number of dwellings approved in this country were higher a decade ago when migration was less than half of what it is today. You just can't make this stuff up. And here we have Bowen saying the housing shortage developed over generations and we are making good progress. No, Mr. Bowen. Look at the data for rents. You can see the housing crisis when rents were relatively stable for the previous decade before Labor came to power. And then they skyrocketed exactly when Labor went on this migration, this unprecedented migration surge. The housing crisis is directly the result of Labor's migration policies. And they're not doing anything about it. Housing starts, housing completions, and dwellings approved are all going actually backwards, or there's no improvement in there when they need to be more than double where they currently are. So why is Labor doing this? Why is Chris Bowen and Labor, why are they causing so much harm? They know this is causing harm. They know that they are causing a housing crisis. They know that they are hurting and punishing the very people that vote for them in higher and higher rents and higher mortgage payments. Why are Labor doing this? Well, firstly, have a listen to this video from Cos Samaras, a pollster, where he says that 85% of Indian migrants, or diaspora, I think he refers to it, but people from India, 85% are voting Labor. Just have a listen to this.
They are much bigger and more important electorally to Labor than I would say the Muslim community is. But yet, Labor has made this decision. So what I'm arguing here is that I don't think it is purely just electoral politics. Because if it was, there are things in their base, bits and pieces in their base, which are massive. 85% of the Indian diaspora voted for the Labor Party at the last election, or thereabouts. It varies across the country.
What was the number? Sorry, Cos?
About 85%. In our polling, whenever we poll them, they're about that. Two-party preferred. Huge numbers.
Well, there you have it. His own admission, a pollster, saying 85% of people that migrated from India to this country, the Indian diaspora, are voting for the Labor Party. So let's have a look at the ABS data. What nation do you think has Labor Party bringing the most migrants in from? Of course, the migration rates are surging from India. What Labor is doing is gerrymandering the Australian electorate. They know that if they can bring more and more migrants in from the subcontinent, that they are very much likely going to vote Labor. And so that takes priority about housing affordability for Australians. An absolute bloody disgrace. But that is what is happening. That is what this Labor Party is doing to Australia. And here we have this dishonest man, Chris Bowen, claiming that the housing shortage developed over generations and they're making good progress. No, the housing crisis in this country started and was exacerbated when the Labor Party decided that they would bring in 1 million people over 2 years. And as for making good progress, well, they've made basically zero progress because housing completions and starts and approvals are still well below where they were a decade ago. This is an unmitigated disaster for our nation. Rents are only going to go higher. Housing prices are only going to go higher. More and more people are going to struggle. More and more people are going to go homeless. But Bowen and the Labor Party don't care because what they are doing is trying to get electoral advantage through the migration schemes into this country. Every single one of those 1 million people that Albanese imported into the country in the first 2 years, almost every single one of them will be eligible to be on the electoral roll and to vote at the next federal election. Albanese is running this migration racket. He is running this migration scam purely for the electoral advantage of the Labor Party, and he doesn't give a stuff about how many Australians are made homeless for it. And then they're covering it up with lies, claiming this is a problem going back a generation. How the hell did Australians vote this mob back in?